very pressing right now. And we are speaking of gender talks, equality, respect, and responsibility. Not so, Raucus?
Yes, that's very correct. And to help us talk about that a little bit, I want to welcome Joanna Ray Reyes, social media manager at Womantra, and Kevin Liverpool, an administrator at Caribbean Male Action Network. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
All right.
Good morning to you and your viewers.
Thank you guys for joining me this morning. We are discussing gender-based violence. We're discussing, this situation that's been prevalent in society, and it's been rising as of late, or getting more attention, I would say, as of late. Let's start with you, Johanna Reyes. Tell me about Womantra. I know the other day you guys had a town meeting to discuss what's been happening in society. What was the outcome of that meeting?
Yes, well, Womantra is a feminist organization. Our work, surrounds public advocacy towards gender justice. So the emergency town hall meeting was in that strain. And we had quite a few participants, persons, from, all walks of society, concerned citizens, academics, as well as seasoned, well-known activists. And the outcome was a series of insights, as well as solutions-oriented discussions with regards to how we can proceed towards a more gender-just Trinidad and Tobago. So things like holding the state as well as our national security services accountable, as well as community building, activities, so like public service announcements, grassroots organizing workshops. So we really had, a fruitful discussion about how to move forward, and well, there would be more meetings and strategizing, to come. This is just one of the first. But we have a good bit of, committed people who would have attended.
Nice, fantastic. Well, Kevin, I want to jump across to you. Can we define what toxic masculinity is?
Sure, thank you. So toxic masculinity would refer to those ideas of how a man would express his manhood. But these ideas are very unhealthy, both in terms with his relationship with women and his relationship with other men. So when we have things coming out such as men are not supposed to cry, or men are always supposed to be strong, or men are supposed to be tough, these things represent the collection of ideas that contribute to toxic masculinity.
And how do we deal with toxic masculinity?
Well, it's really first a recognition that toxic masculinity exists. So for men, it's acknowledging that in many cases we have learned from since boyhood to be men in very unhealthy ways. So it starts first with that recognition. And then once we recognize that, it's a willingness to change. And that willingness comes with being vulnerable, but even vulnerability goes against how society, or most of society, would tell us what a man ought to be. So it's really starting a process of healing for men, healing from those ideals and healing from that socialization that we would have experienced as children.
Now, Johanna Ray, can you tell me a little bit about why this healing that Kevin is talking about that society needs, and needs badly? In the meantime, while men are healing, women are being kidnapped, raped, tortured, killed. How do we balance that process of healing without destroying? How do we manage the balance of protecting women while the men are healing?
Yeah, I think those things have to happen, in tandem. And, there are some really great campaigns. So things like Pull Up Your Brethren, that really kind of, address, that problem, that the now that women are experiencing. So there are men that are, ahead in terms of their healing journey, and who mightn't have been, mightn't have experienced, such traumas that led to, negative behaviors as much. So they really need to be the ones that, hold their fellows accountable. So a simple thing like being out, and if your friend catcalls, a woman, say, hey, yo, that's not cool, So there's that aspect on the individual level, but then there's also, the state implementing the gender-based policy, taking that seriously, but also politicians, and state officials also not contributing to, the patriarchal discourse, because we've heard quite a few situations just over the past, this year, where there were statements made in the House of Parliament, where there were statements made on the campaign trail that, further advance toxic masculinity as opposed to gender justice. So really, everyone needs to be involved, and that way we can address, the danger that women face now, as well as, building, a better society where young boys don't ever feel like, it's a bad thing to cry.
Kevin, do you think that men respect the rights of women?
What we know is that, and this is from the research and from years of study within the women's movement, is that we live within a world where the rights of women are not respected in relation to the rights of men. And these things are seen both at the individual level, but also, as Joanna mentioned, at that institutional level as well.
We've been having these conversations, and I feel as though, yes, we have institutional problems, with from the top come all the way down. I fear, though, that people who sit in a room with an office or whatever the case may be, and they make these policies and all that, it doesn't oftentimes trickle down to the people who are directly affected every single day. How do we get it across the board? Johanna Ray?
Well, in terms of that, what is supposed to happen after a policy is developed and accepted is that there's supposed to be a budget that's attached, as well as an action plan. So, in order to guide the transition from simply being a policy to being, a lived experience, you need to put your money where your mouth is. And then you also need to strategically plan, how exactly you're going to execute, or make real the policy that you would have taken, so much time to develop. So, we have the National Gender Policy. We've had several drafts. And while Womantra earlier in the year, we did our rights deconstructed, where we would have, taken a close, microscopic look at the gender policy, and then kind of offered some recommendations with how it could be expanded, especially given our current context. So we're hoping that, discussions on that specific policy, as well as ways that we can, assist the TTPS, that we can strengthen the TTPS's capacity to assist with gender-based violence situations. Both of those things together, should be able to, advance the cause, among with other community interventions, with regards to sexual and reproductive health education in schools, and just basic, gender-based violence, domestic violence training, within the community. So several things that need to be happening at the same time for us to, get somewhere.
Get some money is the first step, I guess, right? Kevin, can you tell me a little bit about what you guys do at the Caribbean Male Action Network?
Sure. So the Caribbean Male Action Network is a regional network. Currently, we are connected across 8 Caribbean territories. And really, our role is to go against organizations, well, let me not say go against, avoid working in silos.
Okay.
Right? So our goal as a network is to connect organizations who are already working on issues of men and masculinity and promoting gender equality, so that we can share resources, we can share learnings, we can not repeat mistakes of the past, and we can amplify our own work, but also amplify the work within the women's movement and advance gender equality. So at Carryman, we don't see engaging men and boys as an end in itself, but it's a means to achieve gender equality and to end domestic violence.
People often say that term gender equality can get a bit tricky, because let's say physically, mentally, sometimes people believe that women and men can't do the same things because they say we aren't equal. How do we respond to that? How do we take that into the future and treat it accordingly?
Well, in terms of looking at gender equality, I think in terms of the legislative sense or legal sense, what we're thinking about is, access. So we're thinking about access, but we're also thinking about recognition of rights. So, in that stead, I don't think that there's any reason why a woman should be, should not be recognized or should not have access to basic goods and services based on any quote unquote biological, aspect of themselves. I think, we need to think about equality as substantive, equality, whereby, people are, treated based on, what their needs are. And they're responded to, and everybody is responded to with respect. So I think that's kind of where we need to get to with equality. Equality is not necessarily saying that there's sameness, but respect and appreciation for the differences and diversities that exist.
Okay, and that is putting it in very, very succinctly, very correctly as far as I'm concerned. Kevin, before we wrap up, can you tell me how do we move forward? What's the way forward? What can we do on an individual level to get the culture to start shifting a bit?
Yeah, so it requires that for men that we look closely within ourselves. I want to just touch a bit on on Johanna's, the question you gave to Johanna in terms of gender equality. So there is research that says, and this is global averages, that a woman would spend, for example, 10 years of her life on domestic chores and child caring. And when you compare to men globally, he only spends 4 years. So the research is saying that women do 4 to 10 times as much work within the home and caring of children than men do. So at a personal level, as a father and as a husband, what this means for me is that I look at these roles within the home, because really for me, that's where gender equality begins, or one of the places where it would begin, at the home. So I look at these roles, I question myself with why is it that I feel that housework is the domain of women? And then I begin to unpack that, but I move one step further and I share that burden. And I don't see myself as helping my wife, but I see myself as an equal partner at home, responsible for domestic chores and responsible for childcare. It's important that men begin to analyze the way that we have learned how to be men, and that we begin to really question these values. But like I said before, it requires a level of vulnerability, it requires a level of honesty, and it also requires listening to women and listening to their stories and listening to how they navigate and experience sexism within society.
All right, so this morning we learned that we need respect, we need to listen, and we need to respect some more. All right, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me this morning. Johanna Ray Reyes, Social Media Manager at Womantra, and Kevin Liverpool, Administrator at Caribbean Male Action Network. Thank you guys for joining me this morning, and all the best with the rest of your day.
Thank you, and same to you.
Take care. All right, there you have it on the Now Morning Show this morning. We're talking gender-based violence because it's still a very important topic that we need to ventilate a little bit more. Yeah.